You remember the looks, the whispers, the way they tried to write you off like you were a side note in a story they thought they controlled. But here's the twist. You weren't broken. You were calculating, observing, becoming. And now, Elon Musk, visionary rule-breaker disruptor, has chosen you as his first pick for a new kind of leadership. Why? Because the loud talkers are collapsing under the weight of their own noise. Because the ones who played the loudest games are now left in silence, staring at the rubble of a system they tried to weaponize against you. You were never meant to be the pawn. You were the quiet architect, the strategist, the classified blueprint. Give it some time to settle. That line wasn't just a quote, it was a prophecy. Too many ignored it. Too many laughed. But prophecy always ages well, especially when it's tied to truth. They started a game they couldn't finish. And now they watch from the sidelines as you rewrite the rules. They thought the government plan would be led by the usual suspects. They didn't think it would start with the person they tried to break. But Musk did. He knows the value of silence. He knows what it means when someone survives the smear, stays still through the storm, and rises when the noise clears. You weren't destroyed. You were documenting. You were waiting. And now you're leading. This isn't revenge. This is placement, strategic, inevitable, chosen. I'll give you a harsh reality. According to psychologists, the individuals who watch before speaking are the most undervalued in any gathering. Translation: you were studying the rulebook, remodeling the board, and concealing the ace behind your composed exterior, while others were out here playing games. You see, people tend to forget that peace does not exist until the chosen one ceases to respond. In slow motion, it is checkmate. They believed you had run out of moves. They were just allowing them to burn through theirs, first without realizing it. You remained strategic, tactful, and a little petty despite their attempts to bait, break, and shame you. Well, let's face it, a little watch me win is healthy. They feel taken advantage of now. Not because you were spiteful, but because you played it clean and still left with the whole deck. Type amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. Hold on tight, because in this video, we'll explain how you, the chosen one, completely changed the course of events without ever freaking out, and why they're still attempting to understand how you checkmated them with just grace, wisdom, and a well-timed I'm good, love, and joy. 1. You just mastered their game without losing your soul. You never played dirty. They believed they were engaging in a game of power, deceit, and manipulation. However, you were playing a far more sophisticated game. In actuality, your power was never about being louder, messier, or more theatrical. So you didn't have to drop to their level. You didn't play dirty, thus you played the card correctly. And that's precisely what made them feel taken advantage of. They arrived with power plays, guilt trips, backhanded insults, emotional bait, and phony support. Not because you didn't notice the bait, but rather because you saw it all and thought it wasn't worth your soul. They anticipated that you would lose control, retaliate, or demonstrate something. However, you provided them with nothing. No commotion, no drama, no weaknesses in your fortress. They were perplexed by it, since stillness is seen as weakness in their world, but quiet signifies calculation in your world. They believed your generosity to be foolish. It was constraint, but they were unaware of it. You were studying instead of sleeping. You observed all of their movements. While you acquired all the information you needed, you allowed them to believe they were winning by analyzing their patterns. You realized that an audience is not necessary for true power. Therefore, you just were the superior person without attempting to show it. And when the time was perfect, you made a single, silent move that completely turned the tables. That's the reason they're so shaken. No one needed to be exposed, embarrassed, or made to scream. You just took yourself out. You stopped answering. Your life was improved. And you made it very evident that the game is done without ever getting your hands filthy. And you left with your strength, tranquilly, and dignity unharmed. They now have to face the fact that they were the ones who messed up. You didn't fall for their trickery, not because you were deceiving them. It hurts because of it. They stay awake at night because of it. Their twisted little show didn't make you into what they wanted you to be. You remained firm, genuine, and unconcerned. And for some reason, it was the most lethal maneuver of all. Integrity was your winning card the whole time, even if they believed they had the advantage. Additionally, you played it at the perfect time. How the person they underestimated managed to checkmate the whole board without a hitch is now a mystery to them. 2. You studied the pattern of their chaos as they studied your feelings. They devoted a great deal of time to researching your feelings, including what made you tick, what irritated you, and what caused you to cry. They believed they could influence the result if they pressed the appropriate buttons, and they seemed to be doing well for a time. They made you doubt your value, tried your patience, and prodded at your fears. They never understood, however, that you were researching something more profound, the pattern of their turmoil, while they were concentrating on how to control your emotions. They believed you were lost in the lunacy, not merely surviving it. However, you were following it covertly, making mental notes, and creating a behavioral map of them. You were an expert at following the trail they left behind, including every lie, guilt trip, and guileless grin. They believed they were in charge of you, but in reality, they were providing you with all the knowledge you needed to comprehend their true identities. They would love bomb you, retreat, cause uncertainty, and then fabricate a tale to make you seem unstable. You began to notice the pattern. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. You ceased responding as they had anticipated. You stopped protecting yourselves. You ceased your self-explanation. Their game began to unravel at that point, because you were no longer providing the response and emotional instability that such individuals live on. They were perplexed by it. They were frightened by it. You developed emotional fluency in their problem, understanding not just what they did, but also the reasons behind it. Beneath the deception, you began to see how shattered they really were. You knew the formula and were no longer fooled by the performance. That gave you the advantage, not to fight back, but to clearly disengage. Even before it began, you were aware of what was about to happen. You didn't need to make any arguments, pleas, or proof. After seeing the pattern, you left it. They are now upset because of this. They feel played as a result, because they were teaching someone who would eventually outmaneuver them entirely, even if they believed they were playing with someone who was weak. They researched your feelings. You observed their disorder. Ultimately, you not only made it through the storm, but you also developed your ability to predict the weather. 3. Their presence lost power over your absence. They didn't realize the impact of your absence. They felt entitled to your presence, as if you were expected to be there for them at all times. Regardless of their behavior, understanding, forgiving, and loyal. They were used to your presence. They believed you would always return, even after they had treated you disrespectfully. They made a mistake there, because everything changed the day you stopped showing up. They didn't feel it at first. They most likely convinced themselves you were weak, emotional, or resentful, and they even relished it. However, people began to sense the change as the commotion subsided and the phony confidence faded. Since you were the one who really cared, the light and the anchor in their lives, you weren't simply another person. And the absence of that type of energy leaves a hole that cannot be filled by falsehoods, ego, or attention from substitutes. You see, you didn't create a scene, yell, or plead. You just vanished from their everyday existence. You didn't need to expose them or cuss them out. You let life explain itself. And they found quiet when they searched for your response, your encouragement, and your vitality. The sort that comes from someone who has finally realized they're done, not the kind that comes from someone pouting. The remorse began to seep in at that point. Not because they became a better person overnight, but rather because they recognized what they had lost. Your presence, your loyalty, your constancy, and your knowledge. They had no idea how to respect its authority. It wasn't until it was gone that they realized it. Now, your silence is more powerful than any words you could have used. They gambled on you never departing, so now they feel deceived. They believed they had more power, more time, and more opportunities. However, you altered the guidelines without telling anybody. You no longer invest your energy in those who deplete you. You ceased to justify your value. You took your peace and left. And the greatest storyline surprise they didn't anticipate was that they are now forced to relive every moment because they discovered too late that you were the one who kept their lives together, and not simply someone who came and went, and nothing seems steady now that you're gone. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. 4. You're using their own tools now that they trained you without your knowledge. They were unaware that each time they attempted to shatter you, they were really creating a more deadly version of you that was able to see through everything. With each falsehood, insult, and mind trick, they believed they were undermining you. However, they were only training you, inadvertently forming your consciousness, honing your senses, and awakening aspects of your mind and soul that you were unaware of. They believed that the suffering they inflicted would break you. It left you skillful instead. You began to see trends in the way they would change narratives, assign blame, and skew discussions. They betrayed you so often that, in an effort to maintain your sanity, you began mentally recording reality, moment by minute. However, that same behavior has now evolved into a spiritual radar. Before a word is even said, you may sense manipulation. You have lived in survival mode long enough to know the truth by feeling it, not simply by hearing it. So you no longer question your instincts. You went in search of understanding, not retribution. And you discovered that they unknowingly provided you a playbook. Living under control has given you an understanding of its psychology. Since you have experienced every emotional trap and emerged with a mental blueprint, you are aware of them. You decode now instead of reacting. You interpret the motivation behind charm rather than falling for it. You already know that quiet reveals more than confrontation ever could. Therefore, you don't confront to be heard. You now understand the tactics they utilize to control, denigrate, and perplex you better than they do. The difference is that you utilize them to detect, to guard, and to navigate, rather than to destroy. Not because you can read people's timing, tone, and energy, but rather because you can articulate it. You are proficient in deceit. And you smile, take a step back, and allow their performance fall apart naturally when someone shows up with ill intentions while wearing polite clothing. They believe that they were making you a victim. In reality, they created a person who will never be able to be played in the same manner again. 5. You prevailed by using restraint rather than using force. They anticipated a rough fight from you. They waited for you to break, react, shout, or strike out for the explosion. In an attempt to expose them, they were banking on you to expose yourself. But you didn't make them feel that way. You didn't become like them. You didn't use chaos or revenge to express your anguish or rage. You practiced restraint, something they never understood. You saw the treachery. You were hurt by the falsehoods. You were aware of their smear efforts, backhanded compliments, setups, and little traps. You continued to keep your hands clean. You realize that power is about controlling yourself, not about controlling others, which is why you didn't want to respond. You were an expert at it. You understood that not every action warranted a response. You should keep your distance from some things. You were allowing time to speak for you while they were attempting to agitate you. And the truth has matured gracefully with the passage of time. What they believed to be buried has come to life. The weight of truth was too great for their falsehoods to withstand. The strain of who you really are is causing the picture they attempted to present of you to crumble. People are beginning to notice. Most significantly, they are now beginning to notice it. They are haunted by the same quiet they ridiculed. They're keeping track of every cunning remark, deception, and action they took, believing you would never recover. You didn't even need to speak. What's making them insane is that. The fact that you failed to defend yourself in the manner that they desired. Your calm became the loudest message of all, even though you didn't make a scene. You didn't use force to win. By not pushing anything, you prevailed. You had faith in the procedure. You let the truth stand on its own 2 feet. Karma has now intervened, taking on the persona of every choice they made. The same results they said would never occur are now facing them. And throughout it all, you remain silent, serene, and unaltered. That is power, not weakness. And they feel played because of this. 6. You were reprogramming the whole board, but they thought you were just playing checkers. They didn't realize you were developing a whole new military strategy, since they were too preoccupied with winning battles. They performed fast, loud, and ostentatious music. You performed in a subdued, deliberate, and layered manner. It seemed to them like you were losing. You were struck. You said nothing. You didn't respond in the manner they anticipated. They failed to grasp, however, that you were repositioning rather than reacting. Each alleged loss was a premeditated action. Every failure served as a chance to learn, become more resilient, and change course without people realizing it. They believed it to be a simple, predictable game of checkers. Get a response by taking action. However, you were rewriting the game's whole code, much like a coder. Beneath their disarray, you were creating new guidelines, new reactions, and new degrees of self-awareness. The surface was visible to them, but they were never aware of what was going on below. You played to outgrow, and they played to impress. You played to progress, and they played to dominate. They failed to see that you were constantly reframing your set of values. You were making your own rules and unlearning theirs. You stopped playing for approval, understanding, or selection. You completely changed the game so they couldn't access the board anymore. And now, they're still attempting to agitate you with antiquated methods, hoping that the previous you would react. You've outgrown the board, however. You have no interest in demonstrating your ability to defeat them. You're too busy creating something that they weren't asked to do. You don't need retribution. You don't need approval. Closure is not even necessary for you. You've created a new world that doesn't need their consent, involvement, or comprehension. The surprise is that they still believe you are playing the game and are awaiting your next move. However, you've already made progress, risen above them, and moved out of their grasp. They're fumbling, perplexed, and attempting to understand why nothing is functioning anymore. The reason for this is because the game they were playing is no longer even present in your planet. You took all the authority with you when you departed from the board.